Hello and welcome to another tutorial for users of Microsoft Excel. In this tutorial and the next few we're going to start looking at using Excel as a database, which basically involves creating tables or lists of information. And there's a few tips and things to follow to make sure that your tables operate as you want them to. So let's begin. I'm going to actually put a title on for the table. You don't need to do this, but I'm going to create a title. And so I'm going to put my Fred's Video Classics label as the business, and underneath type what it's about, which is a list of rental transactions, I hope. Okay, so the next step is to actually leave a blank row between my titles and the table itself, and that's so Excel doesn't confuse my titles with the table, which will become clear later on. Step number 2 is to put some column heading labels in. So I'm going to start with REF, short for reference. I'm going to put a date in, customer name, movie, and I'm just tabbing across, by the way, to move across here. You can just click in the cell if you want to, or use the right arrow key, doesn't matter. So tab across, format goes into column E, fee into column F, and return goes into column G, and that'll be the return date. So there are my labels. Now you saw then when I pressed the enter key after typing return, the cell highlighter jumped to cell A5, the beginning of the row, and that's because I tabbed across when I was entering those labels. So if you use the tab key to move across, that's a very useful way of saving a bit of time, because when you get to the end of the row, press enter, it jumps back automatically. So I've got my title set up, I've got my column headings, and the next thing to do is start entering the data. The only things you have to bear in mind when you create any table of information is avoid blank columns and blank rows. The next thing to do is obviously enter some data. Now I'm going to have a column of reference numbers here, and it's as simple as typing the number 1 for the first entry. You don't have to have a reference column, it's entirely up to you, but the reason I'm doing it is to make my sorting a little bit more convenient later on. I'll show you what I mean by that obviously later on, but it's an option anyway. The dates I'm just going to put 1st of May in and tab through to the customer. I'm only going to use the first names of my customers here for convenience, because I'm just doing this to illustrate how you use tables, but obviously you can break the name down into first name, last name, or you could have the whole name in one cell, whichever is most convenient. Again, think about whether you might like to sort that information. So the movie title will be Star Wars. Format, I'll put in there Blu-ray. Rental fee, £2.50. Whoops, excuse me. I'll type in 2.5 for the fee, and the return date, let's say that was returned on the 4th of May, 3 days later. Now, in fact, what I'm going to do here is actually replace that last entry with a calculation. And I'm going to simply do equals the rental date plus 3, which also ends up as the 4th of May. Okay, so that cell is formatted as a date. What the calculation does, it simply adds 3 days to the date entry in B5, which is the 1st of May, so self-explanatory. The reason for that is I've decided that all my rentals will have a rental period of 3 days. I did have some extra columns that dealt with late fees and late returns, but I'm going to leave that off for now just to keep it a bit more basic. So, okay, I'm going to come back, just use the arrow keys to hop back to A6 and do my next record. So I'm going to put number 2 in there, and I'll tab across. I'm going to show you different ways of entering the information shortly. Don't worry about how I'm doing it now. So I'm entering it all just sort of manually, if you like. Not using any of Excel's magic features. Now here I'm going to use all of Excel's magic features, which might surprise you. It's not really a magic feature, it's a shortcut. Now if I hold down the control key and just hit the apostrophe key, it copies the content from the previous cell. That's the cell above, not the cell to the left. Okay, so if you're entering your records into your table, as I am here, and you come across an example where you're duplicating a previous record or an entry in a previous record, you can very quickly enter that information with control apostrophe. So that's a very useful one to keep in mind. Okay, so again, it's tab across, £2.50 again the price. Now here, if I did that control apostrophe to copy, because I might think, well, I want the calculation from the previous cell, but if I do that, you'll see what happens is it doesn't really do it properly, because it does duplicate the cell, but the calculation is B5. Now I don't want B5, I want B6, so there's a couple of things I could do. I could edit this one, but a much better way is to simply click in the previous cell, or in this case the cell in G5, and just click and drag down. Remember, just put the mouse pointer over the bottom right of the cell to get the black cross, drag down. And although obviously the date is the same, if I click in that, you will see in the formula bar it now says B6 plus B plus 3, and the reason for that is, of course, it's the relative cell referencing that's come into action. So as I copy the formula down, Excel automatically updates the cell reference to account for the fact that I moved down one row. That was explained in lots of detail in tutorial number 3 and 4 when I did calculations and functions. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, go and have a review of those. Okay, so I'm going to come back to just click into A7. Now at this point I could just type the number 3. There's a couple of things I can do here. I can just highlight cells 1 and 2, or the reference numbers 1 and 2, and then click and drag down, and that'll put number 3 in. Now, to be perfectly honest, that's not very dramatic, because it would actually be quicker for me just to type the number 3. But I've just did that to show you that you can actually automatically create a sequence in advance if you want to. For example, let's say I didn't just want to have the number 3 in. Maybe I wanted to run a whole sequence of numbers down here, so I could now highlight 1 and 2, and then click and drag down. So let's say it's the number 10. Release the mouse button, and there I've created the reference numbers for my first 10 records. And then I don't need to bother with that column now. I can simply add in the rest of the information. So if you're planning to enter lots of records, you can actually just in advance set up things like reference numbers if they're sequential by simply selecting a couple in the sequence, then clicking and drag, and Excel will automatically fill the rest of the series. Now I can actually do that from the number 1. If I select the numbers from 2 to 10, delete, go back to my number 1, put the mouse pointer over the bottom right again. Now you'll see the black cross there. If I press the control key, I'm just sort of pressing and releasing the control key, and you can see the little plus sign appearing top right of that black cross. Now if I hold the control key down and drag down, you'll see that it's just increasing the number by 1 as I drag down. So it's doing the same thing as I did previously, but this time I didn't need the first 2 parts of the sequence. I just needed any number, and Excel automatically counts up, in this case by values of 1, which is fine. So another little tip you might find useful. Okay, we'll carry on then and just enter the third record. Date for this one will be 3rd of May. Tab across again, and we'll enter Dave as our customer. Now Dave is going to take out Star Wars, and you will have seen this before when I did, I think it's tutorial 2, the basic data entry. If I press the letter S, you'll see that Excel recognises there's already an entry that begins with S, and here it's offering me the chance to accept that entry. If I was entering another film like Seven Samurai, I could just carry on and type that, but in this case it just so happens that Excel has offered me the choice I want, so I can simply press the tab key, it'll enter Star Wars and tab across. To enter Blu-ray, I can simply type the B, and again Excel guesses that that's what I want. Again, if it was some alternative format I could carry on typing, but that's fine. So tab across there. Fee will be the same, so I can do control apostrophe, tab across, and here again I can simply click and drag down the calculation, which is 3rd of May plus 3 days is 6th of May. So you saw there, entering that record was very quick because I was simply using Excel's features to pick information that was already existing in the list. Okay, so I'm going to do one more, and what I'm going to do here is show you another way of doing that. So I'm going to put the date in the 5th of May this time. Tab across, and we'll say this is Lisa taking out the film. Now this time, instead of typing, I can right click on that cell, and I have an option here. It says pick from drop down list. Now if I click on that, you'll see it offers me the existing titles in the list, which is Greece and Star Wars. So let's say Lisa's taking out Greece. I can click on Greece. Again, tab across. Now, picking from list here is a bit redundant because there's only one thing existing there, but I'll do it anyway. So if I right click, pick from list, obviously Blu-ray is the only option. So click on that, again, tab across. Now pick from list won't work here. If I try it, I'll just show you. And the reason for that is it doesn't work on numerical values, unfortunately. So it's just text entries it works on there. So I have to type in my price, but I don't need to type it, of course. I can do Control. And here again I can simply copy down my formula from the previous row, and that'll update to show me that Lisa needs to bring a film back on the 8th of May. That's the basics really of creating a table. I'm going to carry on now and enter some more records, so I will come back in a second once I've done that. Okay, so as you can see I've extended the list quite a bit there, and you'll see some problems initially, and also something I haven't actually completed, which is my return date. So I'll do that first. What I've done here is I've entered, again, this is something you might want to consider when you're creating your tables here. I didn't need to actually enter the return date as I went down the list. I've just entered all my rental information here, so the date it was taken out, the customer, title, format, and the fee. But the return I can simply update now, or complete, by simply going to the last entry, putting the mouse pointer over the bottom right again and double clicking, and that will automatically run the formula all the way down the table, and it stops quite cleverly at the last row. It doesn't go zooming off into the distance. Okay, so that's a nice quick way you can update your tables if you need to. So think about where you might be able to do that by simply clicking and dragging down, or double clicking and autofill things. It'll save you a bit of time. Now again, as you can see, and this is something that comes up quite often, column D is the most obvious one here, that it's chopped off a lot of the titles, and as you know I can simply put the mouse pointer between column headings D and E, or column labels D and E, and just double click and that'll auto expand the column. I might decide I can shrink that reference column, and so here, now I don't want to double click because if I do, it actually goes wider. The reason being that the titles are the widest entries in the column. Instead I'm going to manually click and drag, so I shrink that reference column down. And you can see there's plenty of room for 3, 4, even 5 digits there, so that'll go quite a long way before I need to expand it. The date columns both look okay. The customer column looks fine. Again, obviously I'm only using the first name there, and the format and fee columns are both okay as well. I'm going to apply some formatting to the fee column by clicking the letter F to select the whole column, and here I will simply click on the currency button, and that will apply my formatting to column F. Now the benefit of selecting the whole column is that any number I now enter is going to have the currency format. So if I just give an example, type number 1, and it applies the formatting that's already existent in the column. That's also something to watch out for when you're working with spreadsheets. If they have been formatted in advance and you find you enter something in a cell, maybe a number, and it turns into a date or a currency value, it just means that somebody has already applied formatting. You can remove formatting on any cell or the entire sheet by going to the edit menu, going to the clear option, and you can choose formats, and that will delete the formats but leave your information intact. Okay, let's click away from that to cancel. So that concludes the creation side of a table. Before I finish this tutorial, I'm just going to apply a bit of formatting here. So my column headings, I'll just put on a pastel yellow colour, bold as well, and I might actually put a grid on as well. Click my borders option there. Try again, click borders and all borders. And my titles, I'm going to have them go across the table, so I'm going to use merge and center, and do that for row 2 as well. Whoops. Merge and center again, and select both of those, bold, and we'll make those a little bit bigger, maybe 14 to stand out a bit more. And again I could apply that yellow colour for no particular reason. Just to show you that you can add a bit of colour to your spreadsheets, which you know anyway, I'm sure. Okay, so there we have a very nice table, as you can see, and it was as simple as that. So the only things you have to bear in mind are no blank rows and no blank columns. I will demonstrate that in a future tutorial, and how if you do have blank rows and columns, things can go wrong. But just for now, thank you for watching this tutorial. Hope that helps you set up your tables, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.